Oh man, you guys are not going to believe this story. Because honestly, sometimes even I still can't believe it happened. It was completely insane, like something ripped straight out of a bad cop movie, except the cops were fake, and the movie was my actual front yard. It all started, innocently enough, with a $3 piece of plastic, a tiny little white sign that just said, "Private property. Keep out." I'd screwed it into the small patch of grass right near my driveway gate about 2 weeks prior, mainly just to keep the neighborhood dog walkers from treating my landscaping like a public restroom. You know how it is. But this particular Tuesday afternoon, the air just felt different, heavy. I stepped out onto my front porch to grab a package, and I immediately saw them. For guys, navy blue uniforms, official-looking badges clipped to their chests, clustered around my little sign like it was the Zodiac Killer's last confession. They had clipboards, walkie-talkies, the full theater of authority, and they were taking pictures of that tiny piece of signage from, like, multiple angles, for crying out loud. The leader, a thick-necked guy with the practiced arrogance of a mall cop, strolled up with his hand casually resting on what I quickly ID'd as a taser holster, which was already deeply strange. "Sir, I'm Officer Dillon, with the Canyon Creek Residential Standards Unit," he announced, his voice carrying that canned, practiced tone, like he was delivering a script he'd perfected. "This unauthorized installation constitutes a clear violation of Community Standard Code Section 15B. Now, that phrase, Canyon Creek Residential Standards Unit, that's what hit me. That's what made the little alarm bells start ringing. Because my property, this little slice of suburban solitude I'd purchased 6 months earlier, was emphatically not part of any homeowners association. I checked the deed meticulously. "Officer Dillon, I appreciate your time, but this property isn't subject to HOA regulations or any community standards I've ever heard of," I replied, keeping my voice steady, though my blood was starting to simmer. Dillon's expression didn't change, but his three buddies shifted closer, closing the gap. The second man, a skinny guy with a clipboard, chimed in, "We have records showing multiple violation notices sent to this address by a certified mail. Failure to respond escalates this to immediate enforcement action." A cold, hard knot formed in my gut right then, because I knew I hadn't received squat. "I haven't received any certified mail about violations," I insisted. Internally, I was already cataloging everything. The vague authority, the manufactured sense of urgency, the almost too professional uniforms. Something was fundamentally, deeply wrong here, and it was escalating fast. "Sir, we don't have time for lengthy, bureaucratic explanations," Dillon snapped, his tone hardening, and then one of his men produced a bag of tools, bolt cutters, evidence bags, official-looking tags. The fourth guy, silent, built like a brick outhouse, stepped directly into my sight line, blocking my view. "We're trying to handle this cooperatively," the clipboard guy warned. "But interference with enforcement officers carries additional penalties you really don't want to deal with." Enforcement officers. No specific municipal department. No court system cited. Just vague, menacing language. My unease was quickly boiling over into genuine concern. "What municipal department employs you?" I asked, pushing back. "Which court handles these violations?" The brief silence that followed was heavy enough to cut with a knife. Dillon and the clipboard guy exchanged a look that confirmed my growing fear. This wasn't bureaucratic overreach. This was something far darker. "Listen carefully," Dillon hissed, his voice dropping to a menacing register. "You can remove that sign voluntarily and pay the fine, or we can remove it as enforcement action, and you'll face additional penalties. Your choice, but this gets resolved today." Four armed men, essentially threatening me with physical force over a $3 sign. The nameless guy stepped even closer to my front door, forcing me to take a subtle step back. "Our authority doesn't require your understanding or approval, just your compliance." That's when the true fear started creeping up my spine. The coordination, the gear, the practiced intimidation. This wasn't amateur hour. These guys had done this before, maybe dozens of times. But their complete inability to provide basic information about their alleged authority told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't dealing with overzealous neighborhood busybodies. I was facing an organized criminal crew who had perfected the art of impersonating authority figures to shake down unsuspecting homeowners. As the clipboard guy moved his hand closer to his weapon, Ready for the final warning, I realized I was utterly alone against 4 guys willing to use force. But what these so-called officers didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that their target had been chosen very, very carefully. Not by them, by me. My name is Marcus Vance, and for the last 7 years, I've been a special agent with the Office of Inspector General, OIG, specializing in government fraud and public corruption. And for the past 6 months, my team and I had been tracking reports of an organized crime syndicate operating across 5 different states, terrorizing homeowners with these exact same tactics. Fake uniforms, fake citations, massive financial shakedowns. I'd purchased this house, in this community with no legitimate HOA, specifically as bait. The little keep out sign was the deliberate trigger. I watched Dylan and his crew, and everything they did was textbook. The language, the references to community standards that didn't exist, the focus on certified mail to add that federal layer of intimidation. It was all rehearsed. As Dylan continued his threats, I caught myself unconsciously analyzing his syntax, the way we were trained to identify criminal psychology markers. The slight shift in my posture must have registered, because Dylan's eyes narrowed. "You seem awfully calm for someone facing enforcement action," he observed, studying me with uncomfortable intensity. "Most people get more upset." Crap. I'd let my professional detachment show. I want to understand the process." I stammered, forcing a slight tremor into my voice, quickly putting my civilian cover back on. This is all new to me. They kept scrutinizing me, especially the silent, tactical guy. They'd noticed something was off, but they couldn't pin it down. Their biggest mistake, though, was that weapons display. Legitimate code enforcement doesn't carry tasers and wear tactical vests. It showed me this was pure, unadulterated intimidation disguised as official procedure. As the clipboard guy, Harris, as I logged his name internally, moved his hand to his taser grip for the final escalation, I subtly reached down, pretending to adjust my shoe, and pressed the emergency signal button hidden in the sole of my sneaker. 3 short pulses. "Surveillance team standby." My backup was positioned just 2 blocks away, waiting for exactly this moment. But then, another detail caught my eye. The black sedan I'd noticed parked across the street when this whole thing started? It was gone. Either coincidence, or these 4 weren't working alone. If they had their own surveillance team, this operation was far bigger than our initial intelligence suggested. This wasn't just simple fraud. This was organized crime with resources, planning, and significant reach. The silent guy stepped closer to my door. "We've been more than patient," he said quietly, echoing the exact phrasing we had seen in victim statements from 3 other states. A standardized, polished script. This wasn't just a random local crew. Whoever was running this had created training materials and operational procedures sophisticated enough to maintain consistency across multiple jurisdictions. I knew I had to let this play out just long enough to gather the actionable intelligence my team needed to tear down the whole structure. The team left after their intimidation run, but not before Dylan slapped a citation onto my mailbox with a 72-hour compliance deadline. The paperwork was convincing: municipal logos, case number, professional letterhead. But the code references were slightly incorrect, and the payment instructions led straight to a private post office box, not a government treasury. Classic mail fraud. The following morning brought the next phase, a different team. 2 women in sleek business attire who identified themselves as compliance coordinators from the same phantom residential standards division. "Mr. Vance, the lead coordinator, MS. Chun, said, consulting her tablet with practiced efficiency. "We're here to help resolve your compliance issue before it escalates to formal proceedings." The psychological shift was brilliant. From aggressive intimidation to helpful assistance. Good cop/bad cop. Ms. Chin's partner, meanwhile, began photographing everything. My car, my mailbox, my landscaping. They were building comprehensive files on their targets. Ms. Chun pulled up a website on her tablet. It looked utterly legitimate. Professional design, city branding, links to other services. "If you look here, you can see the expanded jurisdiction boundaries that now include your property." She was showing me a fake municipal website, designed purely to lend credibility. She then showed me my alleged violation history. 3 previous notices, specific dates, reference numbers. The psychological impact of seeing official-looking records of violations I'd never received was genuinely unsettling, even knowing it was fabricated. "The good news," she said with practiced sympathy, "is that we can resolve everything today with a single payment." She showed me a breakdown of charges totaling exactly $995, just under the magic $1,000 threshold that would trigger additional federal reporting. Even their pricing structure was sophisticated. I played my role perfectly, asking confused questions while internally cataloging their manipulation. But then, as she glanced down, I saw a text notification briefly flash on her tablet screen. The sender was listed simply as OC Control, and the message read, "2 authorized for Vance property. OC Control, Organization Commander. 2 teams authorized." They hadn't just targeted a random homeowner. They had specifically researched me. The next week was an avalanche of fabricated violations. Every few days, new coordinators showed up. My lawn was too tall, my mailbox was positioned incorrectly, my outdoor lighting was non-compliant. The pressure was relentless. They were trying to wear me down, push me toward a quick payment. But while they were harassing me, my team was working. Every interaction was recorded. Every document was forensically analyzed. The financial trails, which they'd tried so hard to obscure, actually created a comprehensive map of their entire organization. The payments routed through shell companies in 3 different states, all registered to the same small cluster of associates. The communication systems traced back to a central coordination center. The total fraud amount was nearing $2.5 million. They'd also launched a social media campaign, fake community forum posts claiming I was a nuisance, refusing to follow basic community standards. Digital forensics quickly tied it all back to a handful of controlled accounts. What looked like grassroots outrage was coordinated harassment, designed to isolate the victim. The escalation peaked during the 4th week when the physical surveillance became obvious. Black sedans, photography teams documenting my routines, subtle drone surveillance. They were gathering intelligence for potential physical action against anyone who resisted. And then, the moment arrived. The man who had been coordinating the entire operation from behind the scenes finally stepped forward. He appeared at my door on a Tuesday evening, dressed in an impeccably expensive suit, carrying himself with genuine, effortless authority. This wasn't the manufactured aggression of the enforcement teams. This was the intelligence that commanded criminal organizations. "Mr. Vance," he said, extending a hand with practiced sympathy, "I understand you've been having some difficulties with our community standards process. I'm Oswin Kane, Regional Director for the Canyon Creek Residential Standards Unit. I'm here personally because this situation has gotten unnecessarily complicated." OC Control, Oswin Kane. He was masterfully manipulative. After weeks of escalating threats, Kane's reasonable demeanor made him seem like salvation. He pulled out a tablet, showing a settlement agreement. "I have authority to consolidate everything into a single administrative resolution," he offered. "A one-time administrative fee of $1,800 resolves all outstanding violations, preventing any future compliance issues." The amount was perfectly calculated, high enough to be serious, low enough to be a relief compared to the stress. "What's the alternative?" I asked, playing the role of the desperate homeowner. Kane's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, reptilian stare. "The alternative is formal proceedings through our enforcement division, Mr. Vance. And our enforcement teams are authorized to take whatever action necessary to ensure compliance. That process can become quite unpleasant for everyone involved." The implied threat was crystal clear. Pay the $1,800 or face escalating violence. "I need some time to consider this," I stalled, my mind racing. Kane's expression hardened. "Mr. Vance, I'm offering you a one-time opportunity to resolve this quietly. The enforcement teams operate on their own timeline, and I can't guarantee this level of flexibility will be available indefinitely." 24 hours, I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I'll have an answer tomorrow evening." He studied me for a long, uncomfortable moment. I could feel him trying to peer past my civilian mask. Finally, he gave a slow nod. 24 hours. But understand that after tomorrow, this matter moves beyond my authority. The enforcement division handles noncompliance through their own procedures, and those procedures don't involve negotiation." Kane's 24-hour deadline expired at exactly 6 p.m. the following evening. I hadn't responded. The consequences arrived with military precision. 10 men, not 4, not 8, but 10, in the familiar navy blue surrounded my property. This wasn't about paperwork. This was about demonstrating absolute power. Dylan was back, flanked by burly men in heavy tactical gear, the kind of people who resolved problems with broken bones, not citations. "Mr. Vance," Dylan announced loudly, ensuring the neighbors could hear, "you've chosen non-cooperation. We're implementing immediate enforcement action under emergency authority provisions." Harris approached with the bolt cutters, aiming for my $3 sign. The silent, tactical leader, I'd identified him as a former security contractor named Vicente, stepped directly into my space with practiced aggression. "Sir, you need to step back and allow us to complete our enforcement action. Any interference will be considered obstruction of official duties and handled accordingly. I'd like to see your specific legal authority for this action," I insisted, maintaining my cover while internally shifting into tactical readiness. Vicente scoffed. "Our authority doesn't require your understanding or approval, just your compliance." "Under what federal statute are you operating?" I pressed, using terminology that genuine federal agents recognize, a tiny, invisible tripwire. Vicente hesitated, just for a split second. Then he stumbled out the bluff. "Federal oversight provisions under interstate commerce regulations. Your continued non-compliance has triggered expanded jurisdiction protocols." Interstate commerce. That was the opening. It was bureaucratic nonsense, designed to sound legitimate, but it was a reference to federal jurisdiction. "Which federal agency has jurisdiction over residential signage?" I asked, reaching for my phone with deliberate, controlled movements. "I'll call the relevant federal agency to confirm your jurisdiction directly." The reaction was instantaneous. Dylan and Harris exchanged terrified glances. Vicente and the tactical squad moved closer, their hands visibly shifting toward their weapons. "Sir, you need to stop interfering with this enforcement action." Vicente snarled, the edge of violence finally emerging. "Put the phone away and step back from the property line." This was the moment. 10 armed men were surrounding me. Continuing the cover was no longer an option. "Under what federal statute are you operating?" I repeated, my voice now shifting dramatically, not confused, but cold, hard, and laced with unmistakable authority. Vicente's face went blank. He knew something was terribly wrong. Dylan stepped forward, desperate to regain control. "This discussion is over. Remove the sign and process the violation. Any further interference gets handled through detention protocols." "Stop right there," I commanded, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor. Vicente froze mid-movement. "I'm going to give you one final opportunity to identify your actual legal authority," I stated. "Present proper federal credentials, or cease this operation immediately." Dylan squinted, trying to process the shift. "We don't answer to. I don't answer to you," I announced, reaching for my wallet with the deliberate, careful movement of someone trained in weapons retention. "Office of Inspector General," I said, pulling out my badge and ID. "Special Agent Marcus Vance. You gentlemen are interfering with an active federal investigation into organized racketeering and fraud." The transformation was absolute. 10 men, who had been aggressively advancing, instantly froze as if hit by a power surge. Harris's bolt cutters slipped from his hands and clattered onto the concrete. The sound echoed in the sudden, total silence. Vicente, the cold-blooded contractor, was the first to speak. His voice was barely a whisper. "Federal agent." I held up the credentials, the genuine article that their counterfeit badges were trying to mimic. "You have been under federal surveillance for organized fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit racketeering for the past 6 months. Everything you've done has been recorded, documented, and prepared for federal prosecution." The panic was immediate. They went from predators to prey in the space of a single breath. "We didn't know," Dylan stammered, his bravado completely gone. "You didn't know because you're criminals," I replied matter-of-factly. "Professional criminals who made the mistake of targeting a federal agent conducting an active investigation into your organization." "Drop your weapons," I commanded, my voice carrying the absolute authority of legitimate law enforcement. "Place your hands where I can see them." You are all under arrest for conspiracy to commit federal crimes. As I began reading their Miranda rights, unmarked vehicles swarmed the street from both directions, full of OIG agents, the real thing. The contrast between my team's calm, professional efficiency and the fake officer's amateur theatrics was immediately obvious. Dylan made one last, pathetic attempt to maintain his story. This is harassment of legitimate municipal employees. Dylan, I said, consulting my notes. Your real name is David Carter, wanted in 4 states for fraud. Harris is a convicted felon on parole. Vicente is a fugitive from a military court-martial. Should I continue? The color drained from their faces as they realized the depth of the investigation they'd unknowingly walked into. Just then, Oswin Kane's black sedan turned onto the street. He slowed instantly when he saw the flashing lights and the raid vests, but it was too late. He stepped out, trying to maintain his calm, managerial expression. What in God's name is going on here? Oswin Kane, I said, turning to face the man who'd orchestrated months of criminal harassment. Also known as Oscar Clayton, head of OC Control. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit racketeering, wire fraud, and operating a criminal enterprise. As my team slapped the handcuffs on him, right in front of the neighbors he'd manipulated into thinking I was the community problem, the reversal of power was absolute. The man who targeted vulnerable people was taken down by the agent he thought was just another easy mark. 6 months later, I stood in the federal courthouse for the sentencing. The investigation, triggered by that $3 sign, had become one of the largest organized fraud prosecutions in years. 28 defendants across 5 states. $2.5 million in victim restitution. The sentences range from 8 to 20 years. Oswin Kane received 20 years in federal prison. The investigation had revealed that the Residential Standards Unit was a sophisticated front for a global money laundering and criminal enterprise. The little white sign, my $3 piece of plastic, still hangs by my driveway. It's a quiet reminder that no criminal organization, no matter how convincing their fake authority appears, can violate legitimate property rights or threaten citizens when real federal authority is there to defend them. And you know what the crazy part is? My neighbors, who had believed the fake social media posts about my property, they came to me afterwards, sincerely apologizing. They said the pressure, the coordinated deception, it was so convincing that they thought I was the selfish one refusing to comply. It made me realize how easily sophisticated criminals can turn a community against itself. So, I'm curious, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have held your nerve and waited for the escalation, knowing it meant putting yourself at risk for the sake of the bigger case? Or would you have revealed your hand immediately, stopped the local threat, and risked the leadership escaping? Let me know in the comments below, because that choice, the moment between immediate safety and ultimate justice, is the hardest part of the job. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Thanks for watching.